Hey everybody, welcome to the Kickstarter preview for Longshot the Dice game. Now, this is coming out from Perplex Games and designed by Chris Handy, who did the original Longshot about 10 years ago. And he's also done the Paco game series and the Roll and Write game, which is a roll and write game. This game is also a roll and write game. It plays 1 to 8 players. But the thing that's different about it is it's a roll and write, but then it's also a betting game. And what players are going to be betting on is a horse race. Now I should note, this is a pre-production copy, but it's pretty close to final. There could be some minor changes in the artwork and the components and things like that. But I believe this is pretty much what you're going to get once the Kickstarter does fulfill. Now, a couple of things to kind of note. The main thing here that players are going to have is their own kind of player board here. And this is a dry erase board here, so each player is going to get a little marker where they can mark things off and erase things. And this kind of acts as the player's program. You're going to track how much money they have and so on, activate different special abilities over the course of the race. Because the way the game is driven, again, is a roll and write. So these dice are going to be rolled each turn. These kind of act as a start player marker. So the start player will roll this. Everybody will kind of take their actions and things, and then this will pass around the table. Now there are also some cards that we're going to see around the board here, and during each game you're going to set out a group of cards here 1 through 8, and these match, of course, the different horses in here. And if you go through the game, you can actually purchase these horses, so you can actually purchase the number 1 horse here. His name is Chain Reaction. You can see the cost to purchase is $10. Gives you some odds and things like that and special abilities, which I'll get into in a minute. But you can purchase and actually own a horse. Now the game currently comes with 2 sets of cards. You can see here this little icon right there next to my thumb, and this shows this kind of the set that the card belongs to. So the rules as written is basically says grab a set and lay out all those cards, but it does give you a variant where you can kind of mix and match cards from different sets, but you're always going to have 1 through 8 out there. Now the other thing here is a deck of starting cards, which I'll show you. These will be dealt out at the beginning of the game. And finally there is, again, like I said, it's a 1 to 8 player game. So this is kind of the AIs or the dummy players sort of program or little action chart that you can use, and I'll show you how that works too. So if you're playing just you versus the AI, then it will take some actions and things. So the overall course of the game is very simple. Like I said, the start player will roll the dice. You're then going to move the horse indicated here, so the 5 horse, this number of spaces. So this is a die that goes 1 to 3. So the 5 horse will move 2 spaces. See if I can do this without knocking them down with one hand. There we go. And then the other thing to notice, every time you move a horse, you're going to look at that horse's card, whether it's been purchased by a player or not. And then you see along the bottom here, the 1 and the 4 horse have an X. So anytime the 5 horse moves based on the die roll, the other horses that have marked are going to move 1 space each time. So these horses are going to kind of drag each other around, so to speak, through these gameplay mechanics there. Now it is possible to get these other horses crossed off, and so anytime maybe we cross off the 2, whenever the 5 moves, the 2 will also move in addition to the 1 or the 4. So that's going to be the first thing to happen. Roll the die, move some horses, and then each player is going to be able to take an action on their player sheet based on the number on this 8-sided die that was rolled. So let's look at how that works. Again, here is the player sheet, and you can see kind of some different action spots, starting money, and so on. Now, like I said, at the start of the game, players are going to be dealt a card off the starting card deck here, and it's going to show you a couple of different things. It's going to show you to cross off this one and this one from what's called the concession grid. So we're going to mark off, you can see here, the 8 in the upper corner, the yellow 2, and then the red 1 there. So we'll just go ahead and do that right now. And then you're also going to have kind of some initial bets here. So on the 3 and the 7 horse, you're going to have a 2 and a 4. In addition, you're also going to start the game with 12 money. So there we go, we've written that in. And each player is going to get a card similar to this. And when you're playing single player, you're only going to look at the free bets here. So in this case, let's say they got this similar card, they would get the 3 and the 7, and they would get the 2 and the 4 bet there. They always start with $20 here in their pool there. So we would mark and write that down there. They don't have these action spaces in the concession grid. So now we kind of start the game seated with this board kind of marked up a little bit, but going back to our turn example here, you see you can take an action on these various different spots using basically this die here. This is a 5. Now the solo game, the solo player will also use both dice, but I'll explain that in just a second. So now we've got a 5 to deal with. And there's a few things that we can do. So these are the actions that we can do here, and you do these in turn order, starting with the player, of course, who rolled the die to start the turn, then going around the table. So the first thing you do is you go over here to the concessions, and you can mark, in this case, any 5. So we could mark maybe this 5 up here or this one down there. Now what you're trying to do with this concessions thing is complete a row or a column, and anytime you do that you can cross off one of these bonuses here. So I can cross off this, if let's say I completed like this row up here, I'm getting a couple in there. I could cross off that and get $7 into my sort of income there. You could also get these 2 spots here in the middle. Is you get free $3 bets, so you can just go over here and increase a bet here on one of the horses by $3. You could move a horse 3 spaces backwards. You can take some of these extra bonus actions and so on. If you complete a row and a column at the same time, then you would get to mark off 2 of them. So this is kind of an interesting thing to kind of build up and kind of get your engine going a little bit, maybe interact with some of the horses. Now before we move on to some of the other actions, what you can do is actually mark off a wild. So instead, let's say you got the 5 and you don't really like the 5. Well, what you can do here is mark off one of those and then use that as if it was any number. Now you see you have 3 of them, so you can only do that 3 times per game, but let's say you had filled these up. You can, if you wish, take your whole turn off and then erase one of those wilds, so you have a free wild for the next turn, but you don't get to do any action on that turn. Now the next thing you could do is do kind of, we'll call it the helmet action, right? So we could then, we've got a 5 here, we can take and then cross off the helmet action like so. Now what that is it allows you to bet on that horse after a certain point in the race. I'll talk about betting in a minute, but as the horses kind of move around the track here, you can place bets on them over the course of the race. So the race is in progress and you're placing bets. But once they get past this line here, they're almost here to the back to the finish line. You can no longer place bets on them unless you've marked off this sort of helmet column here on that horse. Now the jersey here, if you take the jersey action, so again we've got the 5, maybe instead of this one we did the jersey action on the 5. You'll then look at the 5 card, no matter who has it, and then mark off one of these other things. So let's say, for example, in this case, we owned the 8 horse, so we're very invested in our horse winning. So we use this action here to mark off the shirt action here. So I can go mark off any of these horses here. So whenever the 5 horse moves, the 8 horse will also move 1 space. Now the next thing you could do is you can place a bet on the horse. So again, we have the 5, we can put a bet on the horse up to $3. So you could spend $1, $2, or $3. And if there's already a bet there, you just increase that. So let's say we already had $1 on there, and we can say, oh, we're going to bet an extra $3, so then we're going to turn that into a 4. And of course we've spent that money now to bet, so we're going to have to reduce this here by 3. So now we have $9 left because we use that to bet. Now the last thing you can do is you can buy the horse. So now we could buy the 5 horse. And so you can see here the cost. So this will cost us $6. We'll pay that, and then we'll keep this in front of us. So this will go down here to 3. So now we have the 5 horse in front of us. So we have a couple of things we have access to. First of all, you have a new special ability. So this says when you complete a horizontal row, move any horse -1. So that has to influence this concession grid here. But for example, if you had the 8 horse and you marked off the helmet on some other horse, you move that horse +1. So this will kind of want you to kind of keep taking that action, and you can sort of see how these will interact a little bit. And I'll just show you another example here. So if you have the 4 horse, your bet is free when placed on horses you don't have any money on. So this allows you to basically spend up to $3 on any horse you haven't already bet on without reducing your on-hand cash there if you have this guy. Now the other thing to notice about these horses here is you kind of see the odds here that they'll pay out. Because the early numbered horses have a slightly better chance at winning, they're a little bit more expensive. So you see this is the 4 horse, right? And he costs you $8, so it's a little bit expensive. And then this is his payout, his multiplier, 6, 5, and 4 if he gets first, second, or third. Whereas the 1 horse is a little bit more expensive because it's more of a sure thing. And then, but his payout odds are a little bit lower. And then finally, again, looking at the 8 horse, he's pretty cheap, but his payout odds are much better. So that's all the actions that you do there. I will show you quickly how the AI kind of works, and I'll talk about how the game is going to end and how you're going to get paid out. So the AI then is going to look at both dice that were rolled. So we're going to take a look at 5, column 2. So in this case, this would say bet $2 on the 2 lead horses. So you would take money out of its reserve here and place the bet on whoever the 2 horses are in the lead. And again, tie breaking in this case is the lower numbered horse is the better horse there. So it's just going to resolve an action here. Now if you look at this and for some reason this action is not available, maybe it wants to buy the horse that is, was rolled, but it's already been bought. You're going to drop down to the bottom here with this little asterisk and just do whatever the default is for that column, 3, 2, 1. And you're going to keep track of its bets and its current cash on hand. So a lot of times it'll end up just like taking cash if it ends up running out of cash and so on. And then you can see here the multipliers for the payout at the end of the game, which the players also have. So let's show you that. Now, as horses finish the race and cross the finish line, you're going to start putting them up here. So you can see the first place horse maybe was the 5 horse. Whoever owns that horse will then get $35 at the end of the game, just straight out. And so the second place and third place horse will also have a straight payout. And then you're going to look at your bets and see what you get there. So let's go back over the board like so. So we have the first, second, and third place horse, but we also have these 3 horses that are almost finished. So you still will get some kind of payout here for anything that's after that no bet line. You'll get some kind of consolation, but in this example, these horses were really slow this race, and so they're not really going to pay anything out. So for this example, let's say this was our bets at the end of the game, and just for argument's sake, first, second, and third are these top 3 horses that I have bets in. So first place would be $10 times 5, so that would be 50. This would be second place, so $2 in this case I bet would be times 5, that'd be another 10. $4 times third place would be 20. And then let's say these last 2, they didn't win, place, or show, but they were in that sort of last grouping, so it would be 5 times 1 and 2 times 1. So you basically kind of get your money back if they got close, but they didn't quite get over the finish line before everybody else. So you're going to add all those up and put a value in here. Now over on the side is kind of the final scoring. So here, if you own the horse, so let's say we did own the 5 horse that won that, we would then get the $35 here, like so. And then we would take a look at here, if you have both the shirt and the helmet there for a horse, you're going to get $5 for each of those groups that you spent actions doing there. So that can be a good payout as well. And then you're going to get your bet multipliers all in here. So whatever this is, usually like $100 or so, that's going to pop into there. And then any money that you have left on hand is going to add to points. And you just kind of add all those up. Those are your points or money. And that's how much you have at the end of the game. Now the solo player is a little bit simpler. If they own one of the horses that won, place, or showed, they would get that money. They would have all their betting money here, similar to how we calculated it up, and then of course any money left over there. So that's pretty much the gist of the game. You're going to roll the dice, move a couple of horses, everybody's going to take actions based on what was rolled, and then you're just going to pass this around and keep going. Again, there's 2 sets of cards, you've got lots of special abilities kind of in play here, and you're kind of using this program or your ticket here to sort of make adjustments on the fly as the game goes along. Okay, so that's an overview of how to play Long Shot, the dice game. And so the most interesting thing about this game, I think, is the marriage of roll and write with a betting game. Now, we've seen lots and lots of roll and writes over the last couple of years. Not a ton of betting games, although there's plenty of them that are out there. But the marriage of that is definitely the most interesting thing that I think this game has going for it. Because you've got that ability to kind of adjust and bet on stuff on the fly, which we see with the original Long Shot games like Camel Cup and so on. But you have this sort of kind of 2 parts of it. You've got the concession grid, which is this, it almost kind of acts as like a little bit of an economic engine, a little bit of a combo builder kind of thing. But then you've got the ability to, this is the thing I really like about it, is like being able to mark horses off and being able to kind of piggyback off of that, and then assessing kind of the special abilities and seeing like how can I use that and kind of, sort of upgrade my actions and upgrade my turns. So the first couple turns, you're like, okay, I got this, you just kind of marking stuff off. But as the race kind of evolves and the tension, kind of amplifies as, horses get closer and closer to the finish line, then your turns at the same time are getting more involved and more interesting because you've got different special abilities in play. More horses are kind of dragging other horses along. Some people are like slowing horses down and stuff like that. So it keeps you engaged through the whole game. You're not really just sitting back and watching and just betting and kind of calculating odds. You've got this other kind of like a little mini game going off on the side. And I think thematically, it really kind of ties into kind of going to the track and going to like a racing day. And so I know I've never been to a horse race, but when I've gone to a baseball game, for example, they give you the program as you walk in. You've got the scorecard that you can kind of mark off, and you can kind of mark out the pitches and the outs and all that kind of thing. And this kind of has that similar flavor. You've got your program, you're checking out the different horses, you're checking out the different players and the jockeys and all that stuff. And you're kind of getting the vibe of like an entire day at the racetrack because of that. And so it works really well thematically. And I think the roll and write aspect of that, it just elevates it to that kind of level where the theme actually does really come out of the roll and write aspect, which is not something you see too much of with these roll and writes. Is, you know, you get some heavier ones, some more complex ones, and different cool mechanics, but thematic wise, you know, they kind of are hit or miss, but I think this one is really a good hit with that. And I like how they have the different special abilities that you can use. You can mix and match the horses and get all those you know, variability pieces into the game to kind of make it replayable. Now I will say I've only played this 1, 2, and 3 player. 1 player was very enjoyable actually. You know, the tension is not really, well, I wouldn't say the tension's not there, but the at the table banter is not really there, obviously because you're by yourself. But there is a decent amount of tension when, you know, because the way that the AI works is very, you know, slick. So you just roll the dice, you know, cross-reference the chart. Okay, you give it some money, it buys the horse, it does this. It's very quick and snappy. And it has a little bit of an advantage kind of baked into the basic mechanics because it's not really able to make any choices. So the games that I've played with the AI have been very close. The AI's won some, I've won some. And so it works very well. And it's a good way to kind of learn the game as well. When I first played it, I'd played it solo, and you really get a good sense of kind of the pacing and the timing and sort of how to maybe adjust your bets and your strategy sort of as horses kind of get to that sort of closing window of the race. So it's a good learning tool as well. But the game, to me, I think excels more with more players at the table because then you're able to kind of trash talk and the banter and stuff. Now, I'd really like to play, I mean, it plays up to 8, which might be a lot of players sitting around the table, but at that player count, I think, and I have a strong suspicion this is correct, it will kind of morph into this kind of nice, pretty strategic roll and write kind of game with a, you know, a lower player count to more of a party game. And so if the game is able to kind of fit those kind of 2 niches, I think that's a really good benefit to the game. So anyway, that is Longshot, the dice game. I definitely recommend taking a look at this. It's something new and different. Just kind of as an aside, roll and write is not really my typical thing. I have played some that I liked over the course of the last several years, but I've also played a lot of them, and they just kind of are the same thing. But I think the marriage here in this case of the betting and that kind of, you know, fun tension of a betting and, you know, cheering on a horse and yelling at your horse with that roll and write technique and that mechanic is really an interesting thing, and folks should really at least check it out. So take a look. Thanks.